September 1944, Songshan, China. When American and Chinese forces liberated 24 Korean women from a Japanese military compound, the women initially refused to reveal their real names. They had been warned that capture by Allied soldiers would bring unbearable humiliation. But after years of being brutally forced to service up to 60 Japanese soldiers per day, these women were about to experience something that would shatter everything they'd been told. American soldiers who treated them with dignity, provided medical care, and never laid a hand on them. What happens to a person's understanding of the world when the enemy shows them more humanity than their own captors ever did? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. September 1944. The mountain air in Songshan, China, felt thick and heavy, like a wet blanket pressing down on everything. Young Sim Park sat in a dark cave carved into the mountainside, her back against cold stone that never seemed to warm up no matter how long she pressed against it. She was 19 years old. She was also 7 months pregnant. The baby inside her kicked sometimes, small movements that reminded her she was still alive, even when she wished she was not.
2 years earlier, Young Sim had been a farmer's daughter in a small village near Pyongyang, Korea. Her family grew rice in muddy fields that stretched as far as she could see. They were poor, so poor that some days they ate only one meal. Her father had fallen from a ladder and hurt his leg badly. The bones stuck out in a way that made Young Sim feel sick when she looked at it. They had no money for a doctor. Her mother cried every night, soft sounds that carried through their thin paper walls. Then, one spring day in 1942, a Japanese man came to their village. He wore a clean uniform with shiny buttons. He smiled a lot and spoke Korean with a strange accent. He told the village girls about a wonderful chance. The Japanese military needed workers, he said. Young nurses to help wounded soldiers in safe places far from any fighting. The work would be easy. The pay would be good. Young Sim could send money home to help her father get medicine for his leg.
Young Sim did not want to go. Something about the man's smile made her stomach feel tight, but her father's leg was getting worse. Green and yellow liquid leaked from the wound. The smell made everyone turn away. When the Japanese man came back the next week, Young Sim's mother packed a small bag for her. Inside were 2 spare shirts, a pair of socks, and a photograph of the family taken 3 years earlier, back when they could still afford such things. The truck ride took 3 days. Young Sim and 15 other girls sat in the back, squeezed together like fish in a barrel. They could not see outside. The truck bounced over rough roads. Some girls got sick and threw up. The smell mixed with sweat and fear, a smell Young Sim would never forget. At night, they stopped and slept on the ground. Guards watched them. No one tried to run. Where would they go? They were far from home now, in places where they did not speak the language or know the roads.
When they finally arrived at a place the soldiers called a comfort station, Young Sim learned the truth. There would be no nursing. There would be no safe work far from fighting. The building was made of rough wood that let cold air blow through the cracks. Inside were small rooms, each one barely bigger than a closet. Each room had one thin mattress on the floor and nothing else. No window, no chair. Just a mattress with stains that Young Sim tried not to think about. On her first day, a Japanese officer explained the rules. She would see soldiers every day. Sometimes 10 soldiers, sometimes 40. She would get tickets from each man, small pieces of paper that proved payment had been made. If she refused, she would be beaten. If she tried to run, she would be killed, and so would her family back home. The officer's voice was flat and calm, like he was explaining how to cook rice, not describing the end of her entire life. That first night,
Young Sim cried until her throat hurt and no more tears would come. She thought about jumping off the nearby cliff. She thought about finding a knife. But guards watched everything, and the threat against her family kept playing in her mind like a broken record. Her mother, her father with his bad leg, her two younger brothers, all of them would die if she did not obey. The days blurred together after that. Morning came, soldiers came. They smelled like cigarettes and sake and sweat. Some were rough, grabbing and pushing. Others acted almost apologetic, but they still did what they came to do. Between soldiers, young Sim lay on the dirty mattress and stared at the wooden ceiling. She counted the knots in the wood boards, 37 knots above her mattress. She counted them over and over, trying to think about anything except what was happening to her body. The food was bad. Watery rice with sometimes a bit of fish or vegetable. Never enough. Young Sim's stomach hurt all the time from hunger. The other girls looked like skeletons. Their eyes sunk deep into their faces. Their skin stretched tight over bones that poked out at sharp angles. Once a week, a military doctor examined them for diseases. The doctor's hands were cold. He never looked at their faces, only at their bodies, checking them like someone might check a broken tool to see if it still worked. After 6 months at the first station, young Sim and the others were moved. The war was spreading. Japanese forces needed comfort women closer to the fighting. They loaded the girls onto a ship. The ocean was rough. Girls threw up over the side. The smell of vomit mixed with salt water and diesel fuel. Young Sim stood at the rail and looked down at the dark waves. It would be so easy to climb over and let the water take her. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of her mother's face. Maybe it was just the human body's stubborn refusal to give up, even when the mind has already surrendered. They arrived in China and were moved again, this time to Songshan. The Japanese military had built a base high in the mountains. 24 girls were brought to service the soldiers stationed there. The comfort station was not even a real building, just caves dug into the mountainside with rough wooden walls built across the openings. At night, young Sim could hear artillery fire in the distance, great booming sounds that made the ground shake. The war was getting closer. By early 1944, everything changed. Allied forces, Americans and Chinese, working together, had surrounded Songshan. The siege began. Bombs fell from the sky. The ground exploded in great fountains of dirt and rock. Young Sim and the other girls huddled in the deepest parts of the caves while the mountains shook around them. 14 of the 24 girls died in the bombing, torn apart by explosions or crushed when cave walls collapsed. Young Sim survived, though she did not know why. Maybe luck, maybe fate, maybe just random chance in a world that had stopped making sense. The Japanese soldiers told them terrible things during those final weeks. If the Americans caught them, the soldiers said, worse horrors awaited. American soldiers were animals, they said, monsters who would do things that made even the comfort station seem gentler by comparison. The Americans would torture them slowly. They would cut off their fingers one by one. They would do things so terrible that death would seem like a gift. Better to kill yourself now, the soldiers said, than fall into American hands. Young Sim believed them. Why would the soldiers lie? She had seen enough cruelty in 2 years to know that humans were capable of any evil. If Japanese soldiers, men from a country that claimed to be civilized and modern, could create places like comfort stations, then surely American soldiers could be even worse. After all, the Americans were the enemy. Young Sim had been taught that enemies were always worse than friends, even when friends treated you like garbage. On September 7th, the sounds of battle came very close. Young Sim heard voices shouting in languages she did not recognize. Gunfire cracked like breaking sticks. Explosions shook dust from the cave ceiling. Then, suddenly, silence. A silence so complete it hurt her ears after weeks of constant noise. Young Sim held her breath. The baby kicked inside her. Outside the cave, boots crunched on gravel. Someone was coming. Young Sim pressed herself against the back wall of the cave, making herself as small as possible. Her heart beat so hard she thought it might break through her chest. This was it. The Americans had arrived. Everything the Japanese soldiers had warned about was about to come true. What horrors would the next moments bring?
The boots stopped right outside the cave entrance. Young Sim could see shadows moving across the rough wooden door. Her hands shook so badly she had to grip them together to make them stop. The other 9 surviving girls huddled near her, all of them silent, all of them waiting for whatever came next. One girl, Min Soo, was only 14 years old. Tears ran down her dirty face, making clean tracks through the dust and grime. Then the door opened. Sunlight poured in, so bright after weeks in the dark cave that young Sim had to close her eyes. When she opened them again, she saw soldiers standing in the doorway. But these soldiers looked different from Japanese soldiers. They were taller. Their uniforms were a different color, a kind of green-brown that reminded young Sim of autumn fields back home. Some had pale skin, paler than any person she had ever seen. Others had dark skin, darker than hers. They carried big guns, but the guns pointed at the ground, not at the girls. One soldier stepped forward. He was young, maybe 25 years old. He had light brown hair and blue eyes, eyes the color of the sky on a clear summer day. He looked at the girls huddled against the cave wall. Young Sim waited for him to grab someone, waited for him to start doing the terrible things the Japanese soldiers had warned about. But instead, he did something young Sim did not expect. He took off his helmet and held it against his chest. Then he spoke in broken Chinese, words young Sim barely understood but could guess at from his tone and face. "Safe now," he said. "War over. You safe." Young Sim did not believe him. This had to be a trick. Maybe American soldiers were clever. Maybe they acted nice at first before showing their true nature. She pressed harder against the wall, trying to disappear into the stone. But the soldier did not come closer. Instead, he turned and called to someone outside. Another soldier appeared, this one carrying boxes. The first soldier pointed at the boxes and then at the girls. "Food," he said in Chinese, "for you." The second soldier set the boxes down just inside the cave entrance. Then both soldiers backed away. They did not grab anyone. They did not force anyone to do anything. They just left the boxes and walked back outside into the sunlight. Young Sim stared at the boxes. The smell of food drifted across the cave. Real food, not the watery rice and scraps they had been eating. Her stomach growled so loud the other girls could hear it. Min Soo, the youngest girl, could not resist. She was so hungry, so thin that her bones looked ready to break through her skin. She crawled forward on her hands and knees, moving slow like a wounded animal. When no one stopped her, she reached the boxes and opened the top one. Inside were cans, metal cans with colorful labels showing pictures of meat and vegetables. There were also chocolate bars wrapped in brown paper and packets of something white that Min Soo did not recognize. "It might be poison," whispered another girl, Jung Hee. "They want us to eat it and die." But Min Soo was too hungry to care. She grabbed a chocolate bar and bit into it, paper and all. Her eyes went wide. "It's sweet," she said, her mouth full. "So sweet." She started crying and eating at the same time, shoving chocolate into her mouth like she thought someone might take it away. One by one, the other girls crawled forward. Young Sim went last, her pregnant belly making it hard to move. She picked up a can with a picture of peaches on the label. She did not know how to open it. A soldier saw her struggling and came to the entrance. He held out his hand for the can. Young Sim flinched back, but he just smiled and made a gesture asking for the can. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Slowly, carefully, she handed it to him. He pulled out a small tool and opened the can with a few quick movements. Then he gave it back to her and walked away again. Inside the can, yellow peach slices floated in sweet juice. Young Sim lifted the can to her lips and drank. The sweetness exploded in her mouth, so different from the bitter, bland food she had eaten for 2 years. She drank all the juice and then used her fingers to pull out the peach slices. They were soft and perfect. She ate every piece.
Over the next hour, more soldiers came. They brought more boxes of food. They brought blankets, real blankets that were clean and thick and warm. They brought water in metal containers, clear water that did not taste like dirt or chemicals. And they brought something young Sim had never seen before, a man in a white coat who carried a black bag. The soldiers called him a medic. He was there to help sick and injured people. The medic came into the cave, slowly, holding his hands where the girls could see them, showing he had no weapons. He had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he tried to smile. Through a Chinese translator who had arrived with him, he explained that he wanted to check everyone, to make sure they were healthy, to treat any injuries or sickness. The girls looked at each other. They had seen military doctors before. Those doctors had been cold and rough, treating them like broken machines instead of people. But this medic was different. When he examined Min-Su, he was gentle. He did not grab or push. He asked permission before touching her, waiting for her small nod before listening to her heart with a metal instrument. When he found infected cuts on her legs, he cleaned them carefully with something that stung, but then felt better. He wrapped them in clean white bandages and gave her pills to stop infection. He did the same for each girl, taking his time, never rushing, always asking before touching. Young Sim did not want to go. Something about the man's smile made her stomach feel tight, but her father's leg was getting worse. Green and yellow liquid leaked from the wound. The smell made everyone turn away. When the Japanese man came back the next week, young Sim's mother packed a small bag for her. Inside were 2 spare shirts, a pair of socks, and a photograph of the family taken 3 years earlier, back when they could still afford such things. The truck ride took 3 days. Young Sim and 15 other girls sat in the back, squeezed together like fish in a barrel. They could not see outside. The truck bounced over rough roads. Some girls got sick and threw up. The smell mixed with sweat and fear, a smell young Sim would never forget. At night, they stopped and slept on the ground. Guards watched them. No one tried to run. Where would they go? They were far from home now, in places where they did not speak the language or know the roads. A soldier with Chinese features, maybe Chinese American, spoke to the girls in their language. He told them they were being taken to a safer place down the mountain, where they could rest and recover. He said they would get more food, more medical care, and eventually transportation home to Korea. Home. The word sounded strange. Young Sim had thought she would never see home again. She had thought she would die in these mountains. Another nameless girl buried in an unmarked grave. The walk down the mountain took several hours. The girls moved slowly, weak from hunger and trauma. Soldiers walked with them, carrying the girls who could not walk on their own. They did not complain. They did not force anyone to move faster.
When young Sim needed to stop and rest, they stopped. When another girl needed water, they gave her water. This patient kindness confused young Sim more than cruelty would have. She understood cruelty. She had lived with it every day for 2 years, but this kindness made no sense. These were enemy soldiers. They were supposed to be monsters.
At the base of the mountain, trucks waited. These trucks looked nothing like the Japanese truck that had brought young Sim to China 2 years ago. These trucks were bigger, cleaner, with canvas covers to keep out rain and sun. Soldiers helped the girls climb into the back. The seats had cushions. There was plenty of room to sit without being squeezed together. As the truck started moving, young Sim noticed something painted on the side in white letters. She could not read English, but later she learned the letters spelled out words that meant the truck belonged to the United States Army. The ride lasted maybe an hour. They arrived at a temporary camp where Chinese and American forces had set up tents and buildings. The girls were taken to a tent with cots, real beds with mattresses and pillows and clean sheets. A woman soldier, an American nurse with red hair and freckles, showed them where they could wash. There was soap, real soap that smelled like flowers. There were towels, soft and clean. There was even hot water, heated in big drums over fires. Young Sim had not had a hot bath in 2 years. That night, the girls ate dinner in a mess tent with the soldiers. The food came from those big pots young Sim had seen. There was rice, but not the watery stuff from the comfort station. This rice was fluffy and white and perfect. There was meat, real meat, not tiny scraps, but actual pieces of chicken cooked with vegetables. There was bread, soft and fresh. And there was something the soldiers called ice cream, a frozen sweet cream that melted on young Sim's tongue like a small miracle. She ate until her stomach hurt, then ate a little more because she was afraid this plenty might disappear. Young Sim lay in her cot that night, clean for the first time in months, warm under real blankets, her belly full of good food. The baby kicked inside her. Around her, the other girls slept, really slept, not the half-awake, fearful dozing of the comfort station. Outside, she could hear American soldiers talking and laughing, normal sounds of normal people. No one had touched them. No one had hurt them. The Americans had given them food and medicine and kindness. Everything the Japanese soldiers had said was a lie. But if that was a lie, what else had been a lie? Young Sim stared at the tent ceiling in the darkness, her mind spinning with questions she did not know how to answer.
3 weeks passed in the Allied camp. Every morning, young Sim woke up surprised that she was still alive, still safe, still treated like a human being. The surprise never went away. She kept waiting for the Americans to show their true nature, to become the monsters the Japanese soldiers had described. But it never happened. Each day brought more small kindnesses that chipped away at everything young Sim thought she knew about the world. The American and Chinese soldiers gave the girls new clothes, clean clothes that fit properly and did not have holes or stains. They were simple outfits, cotton shirts and pants in plain colors, but they were the first new clothes young Sim had worn in 2 years. She ran her hands over the smooth fabric, marveling at how it felt against her skin. The nurse with red hair, whose name was Margaret, showed young Sim how to wash clothes using soap and water, then hang them in the sun to dry. Such simple things, such normal things. Things young Sim had forgotten existed.
Margaret spoke no Korean, and young Sim spoke no English, but somehow they communicated through gestures and smiles, and the universal language of women helping each other. Margaret checked on young Sim every day, measuring her belly, listening to the baby's heartbeat, making sure both mother and child stayed healthy. She brought young Sim extra food, the good stuff, milk and eggs and fruit. She never asked questions about how young Sim got pregnant. She never looked at young Sim with judgment or disgust. She just helped, day after day,
expecting nothing in return. This confused young Sim deeply. In the world she had known in the comfort station, everything came with a price. Every kindness hid cruelty underneath. Every gentle word came before violence. But Margaret's kindness seemed to have no hidden cost. She helped because she wanted to help. The idea was so strange that young Sim lay awake at night thinking about it, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle piece that did not fit anywhere.
One afternoon in early October, something happened that changed everything. The camp commander announced that it was an American holiday called Thanksgiving. Young Sim did not understand what the holiday meant, but she understood food. The soldiers spent all day preparing a feast, a meal bigger than anything young Sim had ever seen. They roasted whole turkeys, big birds that must have weighed 15 or 20 pounds each. They made mountains of mashed potatoes with rivers of brown gravy. They baked sweet potatoes topped with something sticky and sweet. They prepared vegetables, 3 different kinds. They made bread rolls, soft and warm. They even made pies, sweet desserts that smelled like cinnamon and sugar. But here was the shocking part. When dinner time came, the soldiers did not eat first and give the girls scraps. Instead, they invited the Korean girls to eat with them, at the same tables, at the same time. They served the girls first, filling their plates with generous portions of everything. A young American soldier, maybe 19 years old, with a face full of freckles, carefully placed a slice of turkey on young Sim's plate. He smiled at her and said something in English she did not understand. But his tone was warm and his eyes were kind. He was serving her, waiting on her, like she was someone important, someone who mattered.
Young Sim looked around the mess tent. American soldiers and Chinese soldiers sat next to Korean comfort women, all eating together, all sharing the same food. Some soldiers even gave the girls the best pieces, the most tender meat, the biggest portions. They acted like this was normal, like former sex slaves deserved to eat good food at a holiday table. Young Sim felt something crack inside her chest, something hard and cold that had been there for 2 years. Tears ran down her face and into her mashed potatoes. She could not stop crying, but for the first time since leaving home, she cried from something other than pain or fear. That night, unable to sleep, young Sim sat outside her tent and looked at the stars. They were the same stars she had seen from Korea, the same stars she had seen from the caves in Songshan. But everything else was different. A Chinese soldier named Chen, who spoke some Korean, sat down next to her. He did not sit too close. He respected her space. For a while, they just looked at the stars together in silence. Then Chen spoke. "You are wondering why we treat you this way," he said. It was not a question. He just knew.
Young Sim nodded. Japanese soldiers said Americans were monsters. They said you would hurt us worse than anything we had known. But you gave us food instead. You gave us medicine. You gave us dignity. Her voice broke on the last word. I do not understand. Why do you not hurt us? Chen was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because hurting defenseless people does not make you strong, he finally said. It makes you weak. Real strength is protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Real power is using your power to help, not to harm. Young Sim thought about this. The Japanese military had been so powerful. They had conquered Korea, invaded China, fought across the Pacific. They had big guns and many soldiers and control over millions of people. But they had used that power to create comfort stations, to enslave girls, to treat human beings like tools. The Americans also had big guns and many soldiers, but they used that power differently.
Everything they told us was lies, young Sim said, and hearing the words out loud made something else crack inside her, something deeper. They said Americans were animals. They said Chinese were inferior. They said we comfort women were serving a noble purpose for the empire. All lies. Yes, Chen said gently. All lies. But why? Young Sim's voice rose, angry now. Why lie? Why make us afraid? Why tell us liberation would be worse than slavery? Because, Chen said, if you knew the truth, you might have hoped. You might have resisted. You might have held on to your humanity. They needed to kill your hope to control you completely. Fear is a powerful weapon, sometimes more powerful than guns. Young Sim put her hand on her pregnant belly. The baby moved under her palm, little kicks and rolls. This baby, growing inside her because of rape, because of violence, because of a system designed to destroy girls and use their bodies. But this baby was also hope. This baby was proof that life continued even after terrible things. This baby would be born into a different world than the one young Sim had known, a world where some soldiers chose kindness over cruelty. Over the next few days, young Sim watched everything with new eyes. She watched American soldiers share cigarettes with Chinese soldiers, both sides working together even though they came from different countries with different languages and different customs. She watched a tall black American soldier gently bandage Min Su's hand when she burned it on a cooking pot. She watched Margaret, the red-haired nurse, stay up all night with young Ni when young Ni got sick with fever. These were not monsters. These were just people. People who had decided to be kind even when they could have been cruel. One morning, a truck arrived carrying mail for the soldiers. Young Sim watched as the Americans gathered around, excited like children, grabbing letters from home. One soldier, a man named Tom with pictures of his wife and baby daughter tucked in his helmet, read his letter 3 times, smiling the whole time. After reading, he saw young Sim watching. He walked over and showed her the pictures. His daughter was maybe 1 year old with curly blonde hair and a big smile. "Beautiful," young Sim said in the few English words she had learned. Tom nodded, proud. Then he said something in English, gesturing to young Sim's belly. The translator later told her what Tom had said. "Your baby will be beautiful too. Your baby deserves a good life, a safe life. We are fighting so all babies can grow up in peace." That was when young Sim truly understood. These soldiers were not fighting because they hated Japanese people. They were fighting because they loved their own people, their own families, and they wanted to protect them. They wanted their children to grow up in a world without war, without slavery, without comfort stations. And somehow, by extension, that meant protecting young Sim too, protecting her baby too. Even though she was Korean, even though she was a former comfort woman, even though she was carrying a child conceived in violence, she still deserved protection. She still deserved dignity. She still deserved to be treated like a human being. Young Sim thought about the Japanese officers who had created the comfort station system. They had claimed it was necessary for the empire, necessary for the war effort, necessary to control soldiers' behavior. They had used words like duty and honor and service. But there was nothing honorable about rape. There was nothing dutiful about slavery. There was nothing serving about destroying a girl's entire life for the convenience of soldiers. The Japanese military had not created comfort stations because it was strong. It had created them because it was weak, because it could not control its soldiers, because it valued power over humanity. Real power, young Sim now understood, looked different. Real power looked like Margaret staying up all night with a sick girl. Real power looked like soldiers sharing their holiday meal with former enemies. Real power looked like Tom fighting a war so his daughter could grow up safe. Real power was choosing to be kind when you could easily be cruel, choosing to help when you could easily hurt,
choosing to see the humanity in others even when they had been stripped of everything that made them feel human. Young Sim placed both hands on her belly and made a silent promise to the baby inside. "I will tell you the truth," she whispered. "Always the truth. I will teach you that kindness is strength, that helping others is power, that every human being deserves dignity no matter who they are or what has happened to them. I will teach you what I learned here, in this camp, from these soldiers who were supposed to be monsters but turned out to be the first people in 2 years to treat me like I mattered." The baby kicked, a strong kick that made young Sim smile. Yes, she thought, life continues, hope continues. The lies had been powerful, but the truth was more powerful. The cruelty had been overwhelming, but the kindness was more overwhelming. Young Sim had been broken, but she was being put back together, piece, by people who owed her nothing but gave her everything. She did not know what would happen next, where she would go, how she would live with the memories of what had been done to her, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The world was bigger than the comfort station. Humanity was bigger than cruelty. And she, young Sim Park, former slave, pregnant survivor, was bigger than what had been done to her. She was still here. She was still alive. And that, by itself, was a kind of victory. February 1946. Young Sim stood at the dock in Busan, Korea, holding her 3-month-old daughter against her chest. The baby's name was Hope, or at least, that was what young Sim called her in her mind, though she had not yet registered an official name. The journey home had taken 4 months, with stops at hospitals and refugee camps along the way. Young Sim had given birth in a Chinese hospital, with Margaret, the red-haired nurse, holding her hand through every contraction. The Americans had made sure she had medicine for the pain, clean sheets on the bed, and proper care after delivery. The baby had been healthy, 5 pounds and 8 ounces, small but strong. Now young Sim was finally back in Korea. But Korea felt like a foreign country. The Japanese had surrendered 5 months earlier. Korea was free after 35 years of occupation. People should have been celebrating. But everywhere young Sim looked, she saw destruction. Buildings stood half-collapsed, their walls blown away by bombs or burned by fires. Streets were full of people with nowhere to go, families searching for lost relatives, orphans begging for food. The smell of poverty and desperation hung over everything like a thick fog. Young Sim walked slowly through the streets of Busan, asking anyone she met if they knew how to get to her village near Pyongyang. But Pyongyang was in the north now, in the Soviet zone. Travel between north and south had become difficult, almost impossible. A kind old woman selling fish from a cart explained that the country was being divided, split in two by foreign powers who could not agree on what should happen to Korea. Young Sim felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had survived slavery and war. She had crossed mountains and oceans to come home. And now the home itself was being torn apart. It took 3 more weeks to reach her village, traveling on foot and in the backs of crowded trucks, and once on a train so packed that young Sim had to stand for 6 hours with the baby strapped to her chest. When she finally walked down the dirt road toward her family's farm, her heart beat so fast she thought it might explode. 4 years had passed since she left. 4 years since that Japanese man with the shiny buttons had smiled and lied and taken her away.
The farm looked smaller than she remembered. The rice fields had not been planted properly. Weeds grew everywhere. The house needed repairs, holes in the roof patched with whatever scraps of wood or metal her family had found. Young Sim stood at the gate, suddenly afraid. What if her family was dead? What if they had moved away? What if they did not want her back, not after what had happened, not with a baby born from rape? Then the door opened. Her mother appeared, older now, hair completely white, face marked by deep lines of worry and hunger. Her mother looked at young Sim for a long moment, like she was seeing a ghost. Then she screamed, not from fear, but from joy, a sound so pure and full of emotion that neighbors came running. Her mother ran across the yard and grabbed young Sim, pulling her close, both of them crying, the baby squished between them, making small sounds of protest.
Inside the house, young Sim's father sat in a chair, his bad leg propped up on a stool. The leg had healed and crooked. He would walk with a limp forever. But he was alive. Her two younger brothers were alive too, though they looked thin and tired, aged beyond their years. Her family was whole, or at least as whole as any family could be after years of war and occupation. That first night, young Sim told them everything. She held nothing back. She told them about the truck ride, the comfort station, the caves in Songshan, the bombing, and finally the liberation. She told them about the American and Chinese soldiers who had fed her, protected her, and treated her with dignity. Her mother cried through the whole story. Her father sat silent, his jaw tight, his hands gripped into fists. Her brothers looked shocked, then angry, then sad. When young Sim finished, her mother spoke first. "You have suffered more than any person should suffer," she said. "But you survived. You came home. And you brought us a grandchild, a new life to remind us that the future is still possible." Over the following months, young Sim learned to live again. She helped in the fields, planting rice and vegetables. She cooked meals for her family. Simple meals, because food was still scarce, but meals made with love and shared together. She cared for hope, watching her daughter grow stronger every day, watching her smile and laugh and reach for things with tiny, curious hands. The baby knew nothing of comfort stations or war. To her, the world was fresh and new and full of possibility. But young Sim could not forget. At night, she sometimes woke from dreams of the cave, of soldiers, of Margaret's kind face, and Tom's pictures of his daughter. She thought about the contrast constantly. The Japanese military had convinced her that Americans were monsters, that enemies could never show mercy, that power always meant cruelty. But the Americans had proven every single thing wrong. They had shown her that strength could be gentle, that power could be used to heal instead of hurt, that even enemies could recognize each other's humanity. Young Sim often wondered what had happened to the other girls. Min Soo had returned to her family in Seoul. Jung Hee had decided to stay in China, too ashamed to come home. The others had scattered like leaves in wind, each trying to build a new life from the broken pieces of the old one. Young Sim wished she could tell them all that returning home, even to a divided and damaged Korea, was worth it, that healing was possible, that life could continue after the worst things imaginable.
One evening in late summer, young Sim sat outside with hope on her lap. The baby was 6 months old now, chubby and healthy, with dark eyes that seemed to see everything. The sun was setting over the rice fields, painting the sky orange and pink and purple. Young Sim thought about everything she had learned in those months with the Allied forces. She thought about the true meaning of strength and dignity and humanity. "Listen carefully," young Sim whispered to her daughter, even though Hope was too young to understand the words. "I will tell you what I learned. I learned that the cruelest lies are the ones that make you afraid of your own salvation. I learned that real power is not taking what you want, but giving what others need. I learned that being human means choosing kindness even when cruelty is easier.
I learned that dignity cannot be taken away, only given away. And I chose to keep mine even when everything else was stolen.
Young Sim kissed her daughter's forehead. The Japanese soldiers told me that being captured by Americans would be worse than death. They were right about one thing. It was transformative. But they were wrong about everything else. Being rescued by soldiers who treated me like a human being did not destroy me. It saved me. Not my body, though they fed and healed that too. They saved something deeper. They saved my belief that goodness exists, that kindness is real, that humans can choose to be better than their worst impulses. The sun dipped below the horizon. Stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Young Sim held her daughter close and made one final promise, not just to Hope, but to herself and to every girl who had suffered in comfort stations across Asia. I will never forget what was done to us, but I will also never forget what was done for us. Both truths matter, the cruelty and the kindness, the lies and the truth, the darkness and the light. And when people ask me what I learned from being a comfort woman rescued by American soldiers, I will tell them this. I learned that the measure of a civilization is not how it treats its friends, but how it treats its enemies. I learned that hope is not naive. It is the bravest thing a broken person can choose. And I learned that no matter how much darkness exists in the world, there will always be people who choose to light a candle instead of cursing the dark.
Young Sim looked down at Hope, already drifting toward sleep. This baby, born from violence but raised in love, would grow up in a new career, a career still finding its way after decades of occupation. Young Sim did not know what the future held, but she knew that she would raise her daughter to value truth over propaganda, kindness over cruelty, and dignity over power, because that was what she had learned from soldiers who were supposed to be monsters, but turned out to be her salvation. That was the gift she would pass on, one generation to the next, a quiet revolution of hope rising from the ashes of war.